So please take a comfortable seat where you can be at rest in yourself. And I'm going to do the same. I welcome you to get comfortable so your physical body won't be a source of distraction during our time together. If it helps you to concentrate or to come inward, you're welcome to close your eyes. As you close your eyes, let yourself transition from whatever your activities were today into the opportunity to be here with everyone and everything and these ancient teachings in yoga, the Dharma. And to support yourself in arriving here, not only is the breath helpful, but also relaxing your mind and your senses and letting your body have permission to be here fully. Make an effort to mentally shed that which would be a distraction or a diversion for you. And then to help you to sense your arrival here, the opportunity to be here, reflect for a few moments on even the good fortune you've had in your life to be on a path of some kind. Yoga, Dharma, service, meditation. Let this good fortune come into your awareness. However far back in your life it stretches, or however recently it's become a part of your path. And allow whatever images, memories, ambiances waft through when you consider this good fortune to be a part of a tradition, a practice, a community. And also the good fortune that you have discovered it before now. You have been a part of this process before this evening. And then to also help place yourself here in this time-space continuum, just the events of today. I'm going to ask you to let this be spontaneous in your own awareness. To bring to mind one thing today that you relied upon. For example, I relied upon these supplements that I'm taking to keep healing my brain injury. Whatever comes to mind, the first spontaneous thing. And try to sense how that thing upon which you were relying got to you. In my case, with the supplements, there's the plants and herbs that created the supplement, the processing of that, the discovery of the medicine. Because I live in a city, there was contemporary packaging and shipping. And I have an organized place in my home where I get to store the supplements. And I have the water and the vessel to drink the water, to swallow the supplements. So choose one thing and let yourself feel all that contributed to you being able to rely upon that thing today. And let yourself have awareness of it, as far reaching as this reliance may be, and as intimate as it may be. Acknowledging that one, now bring another thing you relied upon today into your awareness. I relied upon the traffic light at a very big intersection near my home, where there's like 12 options at this intersection. I also relied upon other people's attention for the intersection. And all the tiny components that make lights. And city planning, the cement that makes the roads, all the components of the car that I was driving, and the lessons I had to learn to be a driver. And the resource I have to own a car. Of course, your list may be infinite, but sense for yourself on this second thing that you brought to mind. And then please do this one more time. One more time, something you relied upon today. I was really delighted to have dandelion greens today from my local grocery store. And to see inside the dandelion greens, the microorganisms, the relationship between plants and our ability to breathe, the air that we breathe here. The most subtle components of dandelion greens, and also the most obvious, the store, the farmers, the transportation between the farmer and the store, the grocery clerks. And again, you may have one thing with an infinite list. And try to sense that thing upon which you were relying and which is now a part of you. And then as you reflect on this, bring into awareness that there's several dozen others here with you, and each one of them also relied upon things in life today. And what an amazing concert of infinite aspects that come together, such that we get to be here right now. And this time that we share will become a memory that our brains and bodies then also are comprised of. the time that we share here together. With a sense of what this stirs in you, what comes to you from this, please join your hands together at your heart. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. You may bow your head to your heart. Release your hands. If you'd like, you can open your eyes. Thank you. So the sounds you're hearing are 8 paws running around the room after having their kitten dinner. And there's a lot of things to explore. So I want to say a little bit about the retreat for the weekend. For those of you who are here, I think most of you are here. A couple are just for the Dharma time tonight. I have a couple of intentions, and I want to set those at the beginning so we can share these intentions together. You'll also see Chris Conaris tomorrow morning and Sunday morning for pranayama. And as well, he's going to join us for part of the morning tomorrow. And then Langdon Roberts is hoping to also come in on Sunday. He's currently in Santa Cruz, so it's based on their timing for when they have to depart Santa Cruz. So one of my primary intentions is that we get to come together, that we are not alone looking at difficult news or trying to comprehend the seriousness of the circumstance that our community and our ecology and our planet are facing. So one of these intentions is met by coming together, by being together. Out of this coming together, I am hoping that we learn how to be with ourselves in both the somatic sense, like the visceral sense, and to be able to bring some words to that, to be able to be present with this interior experience, but also to share it with others. And we'll use a small group format for that. The reason this is important to me is that those of us who are able to have this conversation at all, we have to be able to also foster conversations with those who are not yet aware of the necessity of conversation. As well, when you're walking a certain path, and the path of yoga does include also service, you have a natural inclination when you're on a certain path and it's benefited you, a kind of natural inclination to want to share that with others, to help ease suffering or increase awareness. Well, one way that people respond to that is in conversation. So if we can foster our skills for conversation, when we then converse with others who may not be in the same sort of elevation gain on the mountain that we may be at, just by circumstance, timing, and good fortune. I'm not saying we're more worthwhile people. We may just have been dedicated a little bit longer than somebody else. So our voice and our hearts and our capacity will be more stable. And they're going to need that trust and some stability somewhere to keep walking the path. Because if people sense in a conversation, if they sense instability, which is different than vulnerability. Vulnerability is 100% expected. But if people expect instability in us, why would they want to take our hand to come up into this level of understanding? Why would I reach for the hand of someone who's unstable. One of the things that I'm doing as I watch the climate scientists and the activists and the speakers is I really notice the clarity, the presence, the steadiness, and the vulnerability, the honesty, and the forthrightness, that they have equal measures of that. And I take that in as I'm listening to them. My body is taking in what their body is communicating, and their voice tone and their willingness to be transparent, energized, inspired, devastated, all of it. I'll be introducing you to some of the speakers this evening. We'll hear from Joanna Macy. I have a couple of several minute clips of different people that you can listen to this evening. So one of my intentions is to foster conversation, and I'm not an expert. I'm new in this, relatively new in this. But I do feel sort of a moral obligation, and I'm willing to call us together. And I also appreciate your respect for my limitations and as well my vulnerability. A second thing I'd like to be able to foster for us to give space for is the necessary grief that is intertwined with gratitude. The necessary grief that's intertwined with gratitude, and how gratitude yields to grief. I'll talk about that based on the meditation that we just had after I tell you my other intentions for the weekend. As I'm watching my own process cycling through astonishment and despair and information and activation, as I'm watching myself cycle through that, what I'm also watching is this, I sometimes call this the Ferris wheel of the mind. What I'm watching happen is that felt impressions come up that then have statements, words, phrases, and this sits in the realm of our earliest body memories that become implicit felt sense messages about the way the world is and our place in it, and also our efficacy. So this sits in the realm of my training in neurobiology and trauma-informed care. So I also want to bring forth what that science tells us, because understanding where some of our implicit held beliefs come from and understanding how that can intrude on our ability to be present and how it will shape our interpretation of information, I think this is very essential and empowering, because we need this individually, but for sure there is so much massive collective trauma held in the bodies of everyone and everything and in the earth. So this I'll talk more about the neuroscience of tomorrow and Sunday. I'll weave it through our days together. The other intention I have, so this is my list of intentions for those who just arrived, and hi to Darren. Nice to see your name here. I would like to also give us space for remodeling the mind. This is what I call it, remodeling the mind. So over the last couple of months, I've given some recommended small activities, ways that you can remodel your own thinking and behaving based on the yamas and the niyamas and the 26 qualities of the sattvic heart. And so I want to review some of those recommended activities and give you a few more to really consider, how do we remodel our thinking? Because it's going to be required. And because it's going to be liberating. Because it's going to improve your life, however much time you have remaining on the planet and however much time we have remaining. This remodeling that I'm talking about is really seeing yourself where you've become routinized or entitled or unconscious, and bringing awareness to that. I find it very energizing because it requires and elicits attention multiple times a day in doing this. And it's also very freeing. So ultimately the path of yoga and these other wisdom traditions on the planet, they are about liberation, freedom from the limitations we perceive ourselves to be. So I'll talk more about remodeling the mind in the course of our weekend as well. And then the final thing is, I want to help us know how to get engaged, how to be involved, where to go to look for resources. And I will share with you what I'm following and who I'm following, and you can share resources, of course, as well. So those are my intentions for our weekend together. I'd like to see if there's any questions about that before I go back to the meditation we were just doing. Anybody who has a question is welcome to just unmute or raise your hand and let me know. And if you thought you were coming to learn how to play chess, or this was going to be about knitting, this is not, you're in the wrong Zoom room. Any questions from anybody? Okay. So let me say thank you again then for being willing. You're sort of letting me craft my ideal retreat for the weekend, because these are the questions that I'm also facing. And we may also improvise. We might see what emerges between us and amongst us. There isn't one authority or expert in this room. I just happen to make an offering, and it kind of assigns me a leadership role, more like a facilitation role, but not really beyond that. So then let's go back to the meditation I was just leading, and to start learning to use our voices and share our experiences, I am going to ask some of you for any examples you had that came from the meditation that we just did. And I happen to mention my supplements, the traffic light, which is one that has baffled me since I've lived in this house. It's just over on, some of you know this traffic light. It's at Barber World Foods on Capitol Highway and Taylor's Ferry. And then also the third thing I mentioned was dandelion greens. But how about for some of you, what came to your awareness during the meditation?
Sarah Joy?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Linda. Yeah, I'm up here in Alaska, and someone brought me some venison bone broth. So it took me, when I was really following, I made this fabulous organic vegetable stew with that bone broth. And it started with him shooting the deer. And I watched him hang it on our porch and skin it, and every single step of the way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it was interesting because I thought, where did those carrots come from? Because they didn't come from my garden, because now it's, dead of winter here. So they came from the health food store. But that's the really tough thing when you live in an isolated community in Alaska, is you have to really go. A lot of people brought things by boat and truck and airplane, a lot of fossil fuels.
Mm-hmm.
You start to you think you're eating really healthy, and then you start to realize, how pure is this vegetable stew after all?
Mm.
So it was I couldn't even do 2 and 3 because I was lost lost in that stew for a long time. Thank you for offering that. It was good.
Yeah, and completely understandable to stay in just one, because really it's tied to the cosmos.
Right.
It's tied to this particular microcosm and the macrocosm too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you, Linda. Somebody else who's willing to share? With your voice and your body, you can practice. Yeah, Linda number 2. Hi. You're going to get unmuted there. I'll click a button, see if you can find it.
Okay. Unmute. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Like the other Linda, mine centered around food. It was dinner, and I made a lovely mixture of, happened to be vegetarian tonight. Some things were fairly local and some I don't know, but almost everything involved transportation. So bringing the climate awareness in, that's definitely an element that without that, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such an important consideration right now. How do we create circumstances where we're relying less on what they're calling long chain transportation and rely more on really local, immediate transportation, if any transportation is needed? Some things we may not need transportation, but that's one of the considerations I think for us all in remodeling our minds. What am I purchasing and from where? And how do I educate myself even further? Because we have values I can sense, because I know most of you, we have values for organic or fairly raised. We want people to be treated well on the farms they work on. We have these values, but there's another layer of education that's needed right now. Thanks for touching on that, Linda. Is there perhaps one more person who is willing to try your voice on, and maybe particularly if you're someone who doesn't normally try that on?
Hi, it's Robin.
Hi.
Well, there were two that were difficult for me. The first was my morning shower, which I don't really know where the water comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know there's I think I understand the mechanisms of the man-made part of it, but in terms of so I felt like I need to, or I want to understand more clearly what's going into that. And then the third was my mother.
Mm.
And that was, for a human to exist, there's so much going into that.
Yeah.
It's kind of infinite.
Yeah. Have you ever been in class when I taught the Zen koan? What was the face you had before your mother was born?
No, I don't think so.
This Zen koan was given to me on a retreat a long time ago, because the first Zen koan the teacher gave me, I had the answer for, though I got the answer wrong. The question was, does a dog have Buddha nature? And I was like, yes, the answer is yes. What's the next Zen koan? So this teacher was to give me a different question, and he said, what was the face you had before your mother was born? It's to help hint at how far back our arrival here is. You had your mother and back. So how wonderful you brought, she came to mind during the meditation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Recall that your mom's age is, she's in her 80s now?
She's 91.
91. Okay, so she's Joanna Macy's age. So this is a good segue to see Joanna Macy here. Okay. So this is a clip. I'm going to do some screen sharing so you can see what I'm seeing. This is a 5-minute recording. Thanks for listening.
I spoke to the sky. I remember going out at night in our backyard in Syracuse, where I was studying at the time, and looking up at the stars and wanting them to see us, not to save us. I said, please see us, to see what happens to a planet when we haven't learned how to love each other. If we could be useful in that way, just in that way, it would make it so much easier to bear. It would, that we could become an object lesson for the universe, or at least our part of this galaxy. Don't you think? Wouldn't it make it easier? I'll talk about the Great Train. First, however, what I saw was essential from the dark night, that people are highly defended and unable, many of them unable to express their feelings, and even the knowledge that would trigger those feelings that could touch on loss of optimism, that would, because especially in America, that the successful person is confident and smiles a lot and feels that you has an answer for any problem or discomfort. And so what happened to us, the whole, everyone in this time, it's a time when we have split the atom, and so all of nature seems to be coming unglued, and we're unglued even from our alleged purposes, that we need to come to wake up to what is. But people are afraid to say things that will demonstrate anything of their panic and feelings, that we might not make it. So that's what you really lock up and cover it over. So, and if you try to tell them, don't you realize that we have 50,000 nuclear warheads on the hair trigger alert? Don't you realize that we have acid rain? There's the environmental organizations were delivering information, assuming that they could stir or scare people awake, and was having the opposite effect. So I began to experiment with meditation. Notice, be with our breathing. Notice how you're being breathed. The larger body here is breathing. Now, and using various approaches to soften and help people speak from within and not listen to any, not tell them, but just, and I realized in this that the voice people most need to hear back then in the 70s and now is the voice from within, because the voice within wants to live, and we cover it over with various forms of distraction and addiction. So that was the beginning of it. And that was, I called it, we found that once people shared what was happening for them as they looked at the world, and the divorce, you can help people do that. They need each other. One-on-one isn't nearly as good as having a group. They fall in love with each other and with life. Something is released in them and interpreted to them and help them see that this is not craziness. It's not because they're a failed person, but because they're alive. And it's because they care. And it's because actually they love this world.
Do you feel energized to hear her? You see, she's 90 years old. The spark is so strong. Her passion, her commitment are so high. And for so long. So sometimes in these discussions in yoga teacher training and on retreat, and then especially in Dharma talks, we talk about how to live the Dharma that's yours to live. And I would say that Joanna Macy has definitely lived the Dharma that was hers to live. So just check in with your body and see how it feels to have heard her words and to felt her presence, even in this medium. Let yourself, you can even, if you want to, close your eyes and feel into what comes alive in your body, apprehensions, inspirations, doubts, energy, whatever might come. Listen for that a few moments more, just in your body, what's present. Allowing for the full spectrum experience. There's nothing that your body would express right now that you have to consider alien or unworthy. And you can breathe into whatever your body has brought forth and is still perhaps bringing forth. Let your breath make contact with those emotions, sensations. And when you like, you're welcome to open your eyes if you have been closing them, or of course you can keep your eyes closed. So in talking with my colleagues and also in having teachings from my teacher, for those of you who met Acharya in Mysore last year, some of you are here this evening. He did give a talk, a Zoom talk a couple weeks ago. It was a Sunday morning and there is a recording available. And he was really pointing to two things that I took very strongly from his talk. One is that to really observe how much desire, raga, how much desire and craving and attachment have been leading the minds and the human race. And to see how out of balance that has led us with this very strong attachment to wanting things that we want and simply acclimating to what the next innovation is, like cars and airplanes and fossil fuels and so on. So he spoke quite strongly about that, as well as how easily then we're inclined to forget our interdependence, our interconnectedness. So I'd like to talk about those two things for a few moments, looking through the lens of the yamas, the niyamas, and the 26 qualities of the sattvic heart. So what we learn in yoga, there are 5 causes of suffering, and one of them is raga, means strong craving, grasping, wanting, the wanting mind. It leads to things like addiction and hoarding and a felt sense of ownership and entitlement, but built on an inner sense of insecurity. We experience raga, or this clinging to life. We also experience it just wanting things to go our way. We don't want rain, we want sunshine. We don't want traffic, we want easy roads to cruise on. We don't want to be late, we want to be on time. We don't want a cold dinner, we want the warm dinner. We don't want a lumpy bed, we want a smooth bed. No. We don't want this headache or toothache, we want easy health. We don't want inconvenience, we want convenience. And because the modernization of our societies and civilization has allowed us quite a big measure of this instant gratification, in so many ways, we're anticipating that. And I want us to really, those of us who are here, I've already thanked you for being here and the courage it takes to be here. Let's not think of how other people might be doing that right now, but to really be sincere about how we're still engaged in that. Even if we only have the subtle, like remnants of that, the subtle fragrance of that, because you've done a lot of personal work or you've really addressed this raga in your life, this attachment, try to see where clinging is still happening. Because we can externalize it and see that others are clinging greatly, right? That they have 4 cars or a big home or lots of possessions, or you may know people who are hoarding, for example, or who are struggling with addiction. But I want us to be personal about it. So you can sense it on the grand scale, as my teacher was also talking about it, on the grand scale in the human condition. But what's really essential for us in doing this work is we sense it in ourselves. So even in the small ways, it can seem kind of intrusive to have to put your mind on it so frequently in the course of a day, but reflecting on how many ways today we had clinging, attachment, grasping, wanting mind. In what ways did that show up? I had the luxury of going in my hot tub about an hour and a half or maybe 2 hours ago. I have a hot tub and a cold tub on my back deck. And I have the luxury of seeing the garden from the hot tub and the night sky. And I was like, oh, well, it is kind of raining out here. A little bit windier than I would prefer. Just a flare, through the mind like that. And then I thought about the people I saw living in tents on the side of I-5 today. I was in my hot tub and they were in their tent. They're in their tent somewhere nearby, not very far from my home. It kind of brought me back to, it's like sobering, it brought me back to reality. There are people without homes. They don't even have a hot tub to complain about how windy it is outside at night. And I want to keep knowing that. I think most of you know that I've been sensitive to this in my adult life for a long time, and it's fueled my social justice work, that I am aware of the inequities, but I don't want to go to sleep about it. And I did enjoy the hot tub, and I did have the physiological benefit of hot, cold, and then I did respect the meal that I was able to eat, so taking all of that in, but also noticing, when does the wanting mind or the grasping mind show up? So at base, one of the problematic thought clusters for the human mind is wanting things to be different. And while we might all want things to be different for the climate right now, we want things to be less terrifying, more possible, greater integrity. We want to not be in this incredible dilemma. We may certainly want that. It's completely understandable that we would want that. We also have to live in relationship with reality. So something about us being born at this time, being on the planet at this time, rather than feeling sort of inconvenienced or shortchanged or disrupted by this, could we see it as it's a part of our transformation as individuals and as a society, whether people accept the transformation widely or not, we can individually, and then we can let that kind of ripple out into our relationships. Thoughts and feeling. Lisa, can you say a little bit more about that, please?
It comes to mind when we talk about wanting things to be different, and it's kind of this illusion we have of control over our life. I guess I would, that there is no control, and that whole idea of planning and all this stuff in the future, that's something we don't really know of. But I guess it's something I personally deal with, thoughts of, and come against, especially now, really reflecting on my feeling of instability during this time and thinking how control and the unknown play off of each other.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So in the human nervous system, we have this tremendous fear of the unknown. We do. It's hardwired into us. And the way that manifests for lots of us, particularly in societies where it's become very individualized and our society is based on productivity and we have a certain amount of expectation and also wealth, we tend to feel like the way to have that uncertainty managed is to be in control. But that isn't an indigenous tribal mindset. They're in relationship with nature and life and listening for what's coming in the oceans, in the plants, in the wind. So we do have that hardwired into us by our conditioning, that the nervous system is like, okay, we don't prefer the unknown. It is terrifying because it sparks the survival brain, but then we have it heavily conditioned to us, which is called soft wiring when it's your cultural conditioning. Hard wiring is it's in the electrical wiring that you were born with because of the species. Soft wiring is all the other conditioning that comes in on top of that. And our cultural bias here is for keeping things in control. As you heard Joanna even saying, like, if you're a successful person, you smile, you appear to be competent, and you have answers for everything. And right now we don't. So I like to say, and hopefully this will be a helpful perspective for you, Lisa, that often I'm speaking with people who are trying to recover from addiction of some kind because it's part of the work that I do. And they'll say that they have a need for control. And I say, actually, no, we don't have a need for control because control is not a need, it's a strategy to meet needs. And the needs are for things like stability or order or consistency or grounding. So we have to get really capable of our flexibility right now and it's really helpful to have practices that ground and stabilize and assure and reassure us. But I would not recommend that our reassurance is built on slippery sand. So we have to be able to be flexible, adaptive, and recognize that the ground beneath us is shifting. And it can seem paradoxical that at the same time that yoga teaches how to become more grounded, we also learn there's a fundamental groundlessness of being. But we can't really welcome this fundamental groundlessness of being. That is, there's no solid thing onto which we can hold, and there never has been. We can't welcome that if our nervous system is blown to pieces because it never got to stabilize, because we didn't feel we were a part of a society or a sangha or a community or a family that could help. And I don't mean just the nuclear family, but if we never felt that we were a part of something that we could experience acceptance, belonging, contribution, love, grace, helping when we go off track, that we get reminded how to come back on track. If we didn't have those sort of what's inherent in most tribal societies, if we didn't have that, we might be looking for control on unstable ground. So something to return to in looking at older civilizations and indigenous living is that there's a community that's a container for teaching these things, the felt sense of belonging, your contribution and your place in the society as you have seasons of life. And our contribution changes in different seasons in life. Somebody goes awry in a certain tribe, the thing they fear the most is being shunned and shamed. And the fear of that helps to bring them back, but they're not misusing shunning and shaming in the way that we do in this culture. I'm speaking of this Western culture that we live in. There's some of you coming in from Europe for this, so you can decide if I'm speaking about your culture too. So is this somewhat helpful, Lisa, for your question?
yeah, I just was thinking in terms of what's going on in this big picture of the unknown and the entire sense of control just being, like you said, blown apart has been a really poignant and perfect time to, and for myself to examine that and understand and pay attention to that when those feelings come up. And it's been, like you say, about kind of the work we're going to do this weekend. It's been just this, roller coaster of emotional factors that are just come and go. But this is good. I mean, this to me feels tribal in this connection in this group. This is the third one I've joined, and there's a reason I'm here. The connection's pretty deep. So yeah, that was helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your question. Right. Yeah. And we are becoming aware of the very unstable ground on which we live, literally. And I'll share some of the young speakers with you in a few minutes after I have a specific activity. So we are becoming aware of that. And those of us who've had a little bit more convenience in our lives, maybe we had a little bit less awareness of how fragile life is. We might be prone to a little bit more shock, and we will need each other to kind of like level our ability to come into relationship with what's happening. What you're hinting at there, Lisa, also lets me talk for a few moments about there is internal work to do and there is external action to take, to be a part of. I don't think we have time for all of us to do our individual work and sort that through completely. So while some people have been reflecting on this for a long time and are deeply engaged in the eco-sciences, those who have a measure of grounding or stabilization in the science and also in the actions that can be taken, some of the people that I'm listening to, like Jem Bendel, for example, and Rupert Reed and some others, while we're doing our personal work, I'm also recommending that we listen to what they're talking about. Because it takes a while for one human being to unravel his or her history and his or her conditioning, and the inner work that we need to do is tied to the external work that needs to be done. But some people are very far behind on this internal work, and we probably can't wait for 7 billion people to resolve their trauma histories. So to the extent that each one of us here is dedicated to some of that, it means that you're harnessing this massive difficulty for your transformation. And then you're going to affect people, and they're going to affect people, and they're going to affect people. One of the people I was listening to today was talking about the development of the instrument called the piano, which came in the year 1700. So it's a relatively recent design. And he was describing how somebody had to have the thought about piano and about stringed instruments and about music. Like so many thoughts preceded that particular thought of piano. And then there had to be the creation of piano and the experimentation of piano. And these thoughts were built on previous thoughts of other people. And each thing was going to the next thing, until somebody learned then how to play the piano, and their brain got aware of piano and of music and resonated with piano, and how that itself had hundreds of years in the making for those thoughts to come into flourishing. He was also pointing to how we never know what one of our thoughts is going to be as a catalyst for somebody else. So each time we remodel our brains, which is what I was talking about earlier, using the yamas and niyamas, each time we remodel our thinking, we are going to be able to have an influence on somebody else. Let's do that in a positive directions to the extent that we can. But notice that it took hundreds of years for the piano to be manifest. And it's been around now for hundreds of years. So what I'm pointing to is, yes, we need to do our personal work. And I don't want us to be under any illusions that we need to wait for action on the climate until more people have done their personal work. Whew, that would take a very long time. And I understand when spiritual leaders are recommending that kind of thing. And it is tied to what Joanna was just saying. To the extent that we're holding our emotions, we can't be a part of the solution. So if we recognize I'm contracted, I'm in fear and anxiety, I'm probably not the person you're going to ask to act right now. And I'm not recommending impulsive action by climate leaders or anything like that. I just want us to do this subtle dance between how we're transforming ourselves and how we're able to participate in the transformation that's needed now and was needed 50 years ago and 100 years ago too. Am I speaking clearly enough for you guys? You're following okay? Of course, it's only my opinion. You can counter it. Like I said, I'm here to facilitate. I'm not here to be the expert. I have been listening to a lot of experts and leaders, so I'm funneling them through me to you also. Okay. Thank you again, Lisa, for your question. So on the topic of grasping and wanting, going back to that, how many of you experienced any little bit, like just like a tiny iota today, somewhere, maybe a flicker of grasping? Anybody? Okay, yeah. Okay, so let's see if we can let the body release a little bit of what that feels like. And while we're also here talking together, let me just do something for one moment. I'm not able to multitask with my brain injury, so please pardon me for a moment. Okay. So I'm going to ask you to go into a breakout room, and I did just assign automatically. It's a function in Zoom. And let's just spend a few minutes talking about what was grasping like today. What were the desires? And you might experience some frivolity and also some innocence and maybe even some recognition of how grasping gets in the way. What is its tendencies, its propensities? So please click to join your breakout room. There'll be 2 or 3 of you in each room. Oh, I got to open all rooms. Okay, got it. Welcome back. I'm sorry that it's a sudden return to the Zoom big room. Did anybody get cut off who wants to finish what they were saying to their group? Okay. I do my personal professional training, stuff that I'm a student of, also on Zoom, and this happens from time to time that you get zoomed back when you were mid-moment. So to my group, Linda, I'll come back to you about that question. How did I get a brain injury? I'll tell you more about it another time. These guys have heard. So, okay, how was the feeling of that to be with people? We're okay, you got thumbs up. Were you able to have some camaraderie about this thing on grasping? And in some ways, we have to see the almost like the silliness of it from time to time, right? Why are we grasping for that thing? It's like a habit or a reflex in the mind. A lot of it is conditioned because we can make, like, in one car, you can have two different car seat temperatures. And not in my car, but in some cars, people have like a micro ecosystem for the passenger and for the driver. And so, like Linda was saying, she was going for a walk in Alaska and really wanted it to be like a little bit different weather. And I was saying about the hot tub and the rain. You know, we have so much entitlement and privilege and convenience that some of our grasping it's conditioned based on that. So I'm actually recommending that we give ourselves chances to practice feeling inconvenienced and uncomfortable. And don't make your perfect climate every time you can do it. Small things that you can consider, they do start remodeling the mind. And that's so essential right now. Tomorrow I'll talk more about some of those things you can implement in your daily life. Another thing I wanted to share this evening is these young speakers from the Global South. First, I want to share something that Louisa and Greta are saying about why at a specific conference they're not going to tell their story, but they're going to let these other young speakers from the Global South tell their story. I was really moved by their recognition that they had privilege and their stories have been heard, and they want other people's stories heard, especially other young people. The presence and maturity in these young people, I've watched this many times, and I was crying before I went to the hot tub tonight, watching it again to get it queued up for you. So this is a foreshadowing for you might have tears. Tears could come. Okay. So this is Louisa and Greta first. Let me set up my screen sharing so you can see. This is almost just under 2 minutes, this particular video.
We are honored, Greta and me are honored to have such an incredible group of people with us today. Thank you so much for listening to all of us. Greta, it's your turn. Yes, so we have noticed there is some media attention, and we thought then it is our moral duty to use that media attention. Louisa and I want to use our platform and to lend our voices to those who need to tell their stories. So me and Louisa will not be speaking today. Instead, we will let others speak. We are privileged, and our stories have been told many times over and over again. And it is not our stories that needs to be told and listened to. It is the others. It is the people, especially from the Global South and from indigenous communities who needs to tell their stories. Because the climate emergency is not just something that will impact us in the future. It is not something that will have an impact on children living today when they grow up. It is already affecting countless of people today. People are suffering and dying from it today. So that's why we have created this event to hope that it will be some kind of platform to share the stories that needs to be shared.
Okay, that was a warm-up for the speakers. Are you feeling your bodies? You feel her sincerity and dedication, and she says, it's our moral duty. We can't leave this to young people, but we can be inspired by them. It's a moral duty. So here is the first of those speakers.
Yahweh and greetings from the Marshall Islands. Before I came to Madrid, exactly 2 weeks ago, I experienced 16-foot swells that forced 200 people from their homes. Not only do we have inundations, but we also have the dengue fever epidemic, the flu. And I know just recently, our Pacific neighbors in Samoa are fighting the measles that took 70 lives, 30 of which are children under the age of 4. These are illnesses linked to and made worse by climate change. We've been told that if we want to stay in our islands, we'd have to adapt and elevate, and with migration as the only plan B. We're having to deal with these issues that we in the first place did not create. And may I remind you, the Marshall Islands' contribution to climate change is only 0.00001% of the world's emissions. This is why our country is pushing for a social media campaign called Mad for Survival. And we encourage everyone to join in. My home is only 2 meters above water. With the threats of climate change, we'd lose 2 meters of our culture, our Yahweh, our Manat, our Roro, our Beat, our language, 2 meters of our legends. This is why we created a Youth Leaders Coalition that has the youth create innovative ways to fight climate change and lobby them towards our leaders. A team of students came up with a new sustainable design for a seawall that our Minister of Environment, David Paul, has shown interest towards. This is why our youth should be more involved. When you are in trouble, you find new solutions to face it. And our youth has proven to do so. This is why I'm here, to represent them and their ideas, to be a part of the generation that's going to end the fight against climate change, to voice out the reality of the future that the Marshall Islands is facing, to tell you that we don't want to lose our only 2 meters. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just checking. How are you feeling? Maybe-
Inspired.
Go ahead, Brianna.
I just said inspired.
Inspired. Can you say a little bit more?
He's just so young, and to have so much hope, I guess, is nice to see and feel through his words.
Yeah, he's clearly educated himself. He's able to come to Spain from the Marshall Islands and be there away from his home. His home is very vulnerable right now.
Mm-hmm.
And leaving home when you live in that kind of culture to go somewhere to speak about this, to represent your whole nation and your people. And he does that with passion and commitment, intelligence.
And calmness.
Yeah. 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 Thank you, Brianna. I'll keep adding the spotlight when someone wants to speak because I want to diminish your focus on me and increase our focus on each other. Any other responses to this young man? Or to their situation? Yeah, Pam.
Yeah, I would just like to say I have met a number of amazing young people. Some of the young people who are in the climate change litigation here in the United States, the Juliana case, and I am just so inspired by the people who are going to be leading this country 30, 40 years from now. I just hope I live long enough to see what they get up to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I think this is so essential that in our generation and above, we have to be able to foster conversations with the youth who aren't yet aware, who aren't yet that inspiring, and who don't feel like they can do something. Because there are these youth activists who are incredible. They're engaged and involved, and they're on both sides of the they're bipartisan. It shows up on both sides. And to be able to encourage the percentage of young people right now who are kind of asleep to this, having other young people be this inspired and dedicated and to be role models is really essential. I feel the ripple for that too, Pam.
I feel that those of us who have had the good fortune to find a way in this world where we have studied the Dharma and get to live that to some extent. I also feel a strong obligation to make space in this world for the young people who have that native curiosity, to teach them how do you do this? How do you talk to your local senator? How do you how do you get an idea going? How do you organize a group of people to go and do something? Yeah. How do you?
With
I
you.
just wanted to say that book I brought up last time called Youth to Power is a fantastic book. I sent that to my daughter, and it has some writings in there from Greta Thunberg, but it has all of that, how to and how do you.
Yeah.
So I don't have it I don't remember the author's name, but I'll look it up.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah. And thank you, Pam. Yeah. I want to fan that flame for young people too, because their vitality is a resource for us to tap into. And we also don't want them just to be completely terrified and overwhelmed and then go into apathy, addiction, or resignation. And we know the propensity for the human mind, especially in societies where there's so much convenience, the human mind can go into the solutions are somebody else's, it can go to apathy, and it can go to addiction. So we really want to fan that flame for the young people who are involved or near to involvement, and we can help spark that for them. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would like to share one more young person this evening. Let me get it for you. Okay, this is from the Philippines, a place that I've been to. And this is a couple minutes video here. Here you go.
To be joined by Kisha Era Muyanya from the Philippines. It's your turn to speak. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good morning, everyone. I am here in front of you for ocean emergency and climate action. I can still remember the calm waves, the ocean in harmony, the colorful corals, the tropical and endemic fishes, the diverse and rich life underwater. But now, the ocean, the heart of the planet, my home, my comfort zone is badly affected by climate emergency. And the comfort zone that I once knew, the playground that I once knew, is not the same anymore. In this time of crisis, I want you to desperately seek for alternatives because solutions will take time and we have to start from somewhere right now.
living in one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change, surrounded by water where 45% of the population depends on marine resources to thrive and survive. As the global center of marine biodiversity, we have a lot to offer. But what happened now? We have massive decline of fisheries catch, inevitable sea level rise with rising of temperatures badly influencing marine wildlife and blue habitats, saltwater intrusion, massive drought, including drinking water shortages, and food security. Give us the very reason to take heed of all this and from there create a wholesome and real action. Sadly, the most vulnerable nation to risk this climate change, according to Global Peace Index of 2019, is none other than my very own country, the Philippines. 47% of the population is in regions highly exposed to climate risk, such as floods, tsunami, tropical cyclones, drought, and earthquakes. 971 million people at risk undergoing extreme weather events and peacefulness breakdowns in the impending decades. These environmental concerns can indirectly increase the likelihood of violent conflict through livelihood stability and security, resource availability, and even migration. The Philippines has been making legislative measures in response to climate change, which is a really good foundation. However, real-time, robust, and lasting action is needed. To the global leaders, this is your time to do the right decision. We are talking about life and survival here. This is supposed to be a blue call. Please walk the talk and make it as blue as possible as you can. Every second is a time for action. And we are here with the young activists all over the world because we are action.
Also very passionate, right? When he is talking, every second is a chance for action. That's why I'm also recommending we really balance the sense that our inner healing has to precede taking action. They really need to be side by side. And in so many ways, taking action is going to be a part of our inner healing. And I'll talk about that when I talk about implicit messages and the trauma impressions that we have within us tomorrow. Because doing only our inner healing, but not taking action will cause another layer of trauma to the body while the earth is having its assault from humanity. So these have to be side by side. Taking action is a part of our healing. Of course, if their system is very dysregulated by the unhealed wounds that they are facing, having a steward, a chaperone, a shaman, a midwife, a teacher, a community to help them with that while taking action, that can be very powerful as well. I'm not saying we don't need personal healing. I don't want us to postpone taking action until our personal healing is sort of complete enough, as it were. Let's not underestimate how being involved at certain levels and in certain conversations may be the essential thing for your healing. So any questions or observations from that speaker that want to be voiced? Anybody who wants to practice having their voice? We will be closing in a few minutes this evening. Amelia?
Yeah, I could definitely sense the urgency and the fear. I thought it was a girl though, in her tone of voice or his. It made my heart race. That one was very, very intense.
Yeah. You can imagine living in a society where 47% of the people are exposed right now to the climate crisis in a very real way. Imagine if in Eugene, Oregon, 47% of the people, you live in Eugene, that's why I'm saying, if 47% of the people felt tremendous despair and actual adversity from the climate crisis, how you might feel living there. for any one of us, if 47% of the people in our neighborhood felt that, how we might be feeling right now.
Yeah. And when she was talking about the coral reefs, imagining like as a kid growing up, seeing those beautiful coral reefs and then
Yeah.
turning to white and gray
Yeah.
and disappearing. Like that's got to be terrifying.
Yeah. So it's good to actually let your heart race a bit with the information. That's a genuine somatic response to what you're hearing. And what I'm going to be recommending this weekend and in an ongoing way is that because we're on a path that includes a somatic practice, that we let our bodies be a part of it. That we don't go to the yoga to then diminish or squash this response when your heart races, that you say, okay, this too is also our yoga. And the sensations are like a respect to the person you just heard speaking and to what their country is facing. It's not a sign that you're an inadequate person or somehow too sensitive. The sensitivity is just enough. So we let it come through.
I just want to say thank you for saying that, because I've been feeling so overwhelmed in a lot of other ways of what's going on that I've stayed away from yoga, which is the opposite. I don't understand that, but that's what's happened. And I'm just glad you said that, because that balance between what you're feeling and experiencing and what yoga can help ground and
Yeah.
be a good connection. That's important.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'd like us to use our yoga practice this weekend to allow for the full feeling when it needs to come through. It's also respectful, as I was just saying, to the people who are really suffering right now. If their suffering touches you from this distance and you let the whole body feel what comes through, it's a gesture of respect to them. It also means that you're a conduit for the grief and fear that's happening right now. And to the extent that our bodies are microorganisms that the earth is relying on, if we're holding our emotions in, we actually become more blocked and more fragile. So we want to use the yoga practices to help with this somatic healing. You also can use your yoga practice to help you reconcile that which you're adding. So what I mean by this is our held conditioning and our personal trauma that we then add to what we're hearing, that is ours to work with and to resolve in community. But when sometimes it adds to the terrible news we're hearing, we then escalate through the lens of our trauma into a kind of frayed reaction. And I'm going to recommend that we respect the healing that's ours to do, have that be a part of our yoga practice as well. But let's see if we can also discern between the tragedy we're seeing, like for this whole country, and how our tragedy is being catalyzed by that as well. Not to segregate them, but to see that they have reciprocity between them. And then there will be times when really what you need is a practice that gets you back to sanity and clarity, so you can be a lighthouse for somebody else who has less practice than you do, or who's less stabilizable than you are. Is this making some sense when I'm describing these different ways to use your yoga practice right now? You're following okay? All right, thank you, Evelyn. I can see sign language works for me. Yeah. Yeah. I have a hunch that our personal healing could be quickened during this time as individuals, because the despair is so huge. You can't postpone your own healing right now. It's going to be in the blender with everything else. And to the extent that we can give ourselves over to this personal healing that is also done in community. As we're doing that, we're going to be more clear and more porous, more able to help. The earth was meant to be porous, not to have all this cement, for example. The earth was meant to be breathable. The ocean is half of our lungs. We're meant to be breathable, not contracted. So anything else that wants to be shared this evening? Something before we have a little closing meditation, something you're holding or you feel inspired, or you just don't practice very often having your voice in community and you might want to try it on?
I haven't quite figured out how to say this, but I guess what I'm experiencing is a shock of recognition that the environmental crises that the global South, I've never heard that term, is experiencing. It's another iteration of racism,
It is.
and that's just like it's a real punch to my gut.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Robin, for sharing that. It is another form of racism. Yeah. So as that shock of recognition comes, I do recommend you allow your whole body to feel it. I know you, and I know you have the fortitude for feeling that. I do. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. When these flickers of recognition come through, this is a good place to share it, right here in a community like this. Not to sign off on Zoom tonight and then just feel it by yourself. Say, wow, I'm really getting it.
Yeah. I don't know, I'm just thinking about my dad, who was an environmental activist, mainly in the 70s, and really passionate about it. And his passion was very traumatizing for me. I mean, he also instilled a lot of values that I hold dear about the environment, but I think there's some of that coming up too,
Mm-hmm.
like hearing these truths again that I grew up hearing. And
Mm-hmm. So this is a really beautiful example, Robin, of how the larger news and our personal healing are tied together. And we can use our yoga practice to feel the shocking recognition that you just had, and also in your yoga to feel the personal history that's getting stirred right now, and to allow those to be integral to the healing on each side. Your personal healing is connected to the collective healing.
mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, let's sit for a few moments together, please. I want to close the evening using one of our practices, contemplation, reflection, stillness. So please take a seat once again that's yours. And if it helps you, you can put your hands where they are comforting to you. Maybe one on the heart, one on the belly, or two hands on the heart. And bring into your awareness the sensations, the conversations, and then let your attention start rippling out beyond the Zoom room participants to feel to the Marshall Islands, to the Philippines. We're here from the UK and the Pacific Northwest up to Alaska, East Coast. Invite yourself to feel what you feel and for it to be an ever unfolding process. As you hold the planet and the citizens in your heart right now, please join your hands in Anjali Mudra. May everyone and everything be free from unnecessary pain and suffering. For those who must experience suffering or pain, may it be as gentle as possible. May everyone be companioned and no one forgotten. May we also access camaraderie and joy, love and authenticity. Thank you very much, everyone. Namaste. Thank you also to my teachers and my teachers' teachers, and to all of you for also being teachers. Thank you. I'll see you in the morning for the 7 a.m. pranayama with our friend Chris Canaris. Good night.